A quick recap. In 1368 DR, the Western Division of the Iron Throne, led by Richter Anchev, hatched a sinister plot whereby the Iron Throne would stop the flow of iron into the city of Baldur's Gate. This was achieved by the Iron Throne disrupting the flow of trade along the Sword Coast, using two mercenary groups called the Chill and the Black Talons.
I have a blade with your name on it.
Meanwhile, the Iron Throne had a secret mine in the Cloakwood, where they would use slave labour to cut down on the costs of production. As the Iron Throne was stockpiling huge amounts of iron, they would also be working to make it look like Arm were the ones causing these trade problems, and therefore the throne was stoking the embers of war, manipulating the leadership of Baldur's Gate into thinking that Arm were preparing for an invasion, where, just as they would be preparing for that war, the Iron Throne would swoop in and be the exclusive supplier of iron to a paranoid and war-ready Baldur's Gate. The key here was that Richter didn't actually want the war to erupt, but his adopted son, Sarevok, did. Sarevok was a ballspawn and wished to become the new Lord of Murder, believing that a war between Baldur's Gate and the Nation of Arm at his behest would generate enough bloodshed to ascend him to become the new God of Murder. Sarevok almost achieved this by having the Duke Entar Silvershield assassinated and blaming the murders on the Shadow Thieves of Arm. Also, whilst his father Richter was having a meeting with two agents from the Knights of the Shield in Candlekeep called Tooth and Kestor, Sarevok had his adoptive father and the agents from the Knights of the Shield reportedly murdered, and blamed it on us, the player character. We can find a letter in the Iron Throne headquarters from the Knights of the Shield that is addressed to Richter and talks of Zhentarim and Harper agents. Sarevok also writes a letter to his father Richter stating that the player character is actually working for the Zhentarim, playing on his father's paranoia. In the end, the player character manages to expose Sarevok just before he was coronated as Duke of Baldur's Gate, and the Iron Throne and Sarevok's plans come tumbling down. But where are the Iron Throne now, and how did it all start? Well, it turns out that everyone in the meeting at Candlekeep survived, they were never murdered, and Richter Anchev was actually just a fake name all along. The man who we thought was called Richter was actually someone called Richter, so I will refer to him as such in the rest of this video. If you do your own reading around this, then you'll notice that Richter is actually called Richter in Cloak and Dagger 2000, but I believe this is an error as he is referred to as Richter everywhere else. Richter was actually hired into the Iron Throne because of his morals and his proficiency as an assassin, having been formerly known as the Red Man due to the red mask that he used to don during assassinations. After the events in Baldur's Gate and his adopted son Sarevok having used the Iron Throne for his own personal schemes, Richter was no longer able to return to the city, but we will get back to that later. I mentioned earlier that Richter was in charge of the Western Division of the Iron Throne. Well, he was also titled as the Arm of the Iron Throne, and that gave him certain responsibilities, such as managing all the merchants associated with the trading group. His boss was actually a woman called Safina. She was the actual founder of the Iron Throne out in the Eastern Heartlands, and according to Cloak and Dagger 2000, Safina was born in the year 1278 DR to an unknown devil father, but her mother was a devil called Glasia, the Princess of Hell and the daughter to Asmodeus. So Safina was Asmodeus' granddaughter, which is not a bad position to be in. In 1347 DR, Safina was sent by her grandfather to assassinate a storm giant noble who was planning to invade Avernus. Safina actually failed in her task and was executed by the storm giants, but somehow she managed to survive when her skin crystallized, causing her head to reattach, although she was horrifically ugly and deformed after this. However, the execution meant that she was no longer tied to her mother's will, and therefore was free to roam Toril without having to go back to the Nine Hells. Safina concocted a plan whereby she would start the Iron Throne alongside a storm giant ally called Krakosh, who himself was disillusioned by his lot in Storm Giant society. He assisted her in her escape from the Storm Giant dungeon. Safina intended to make the Iron Throne big with lots of resources, money and political power, and then trade it to another devil so that she could cure herself of her deformities. Of course, the 3,000 odd members of the Iron Throne were not aware of her intentions, including Krakosh.
I don't know. Nobody tells me nothing.
So the Iron Throne is only 21 years old by the events of Baldur's Gate 1, and ironically, during Baldur's Gate 1, the Iron Throne spends its time trying to trick and deceive its way into more power and money, when in fact the entire organisation itself is being tricked and deceived by its very own leader. Every regional leader of the Iron Throne answers to Safina, and their loyalty is guaranteed through a Gaias, which is a form of magic where if the target of the Gaias is disloyal, then they may suffer some kind of sickness or pain. Richter had a Gaius with Safina, but according to Powers of Faerun in 1371 DR, so 3 years after the events of Baldur's Gate, Maredi, a half-elf wizard who was an ambitious lieutenant in the Iron Throne, revealed Safina's location to her devil father, where she was then believed to be kidnapped and taken back to the Nine Hells. Krakosh, the second in command, believed that an attempted coup was taking place and waged a bloody war within the organisation against fellow lieutenants. Once he emerged victorious, Maredi actually became Krakosh's number 2, as he had convinced the Storm Giant in true devious Iron Throne fashion that he had had nothing to do with Safina's disappearance. According to the Lords of Darkness, Krakosh poured a lot of resources into trying to find Safina, whilst Maredi tries to continue to build wealth and power in the organisation, where one day he could eventually get rid of Krakosh as well. One of the Iron Throne's new money-making projects was the sale of drugs from Red Wizard enclaves, and although the sale of arms was their most profitable and legal venture, they continued to utilise common bandits to raid rival trading caravans.
Sorry, friend, but you've got a date down under.
Learning little from the debacle along the Sword Coast a few years prior. Speaking of which, what was Richter up to during the reign of Krakosh? The western division of the Iron Throne was in tatters, their headquarters being used for refugees in Siege of Dragonspear, and Richter, having been betrayed by his own son, would have, I imagine, felt pretty low.
He had lost his fiancée, his career, his family, and his entourage.
I have no one in my life who cares for me.
Still, even after everything, Richter's identity was not known to the people of Baldur's Gate. They did not know him to be Richter the Assassin, and still only thought of him as Rieltar Anchev, Devious Merchant. The next bit of information is all taken from the 2007 Grand History of the Realms, and part of it appears to contradict or retcon the information we already had regarding Safina, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So it appears that sometime after the events of the first game, Richter bought a mansion outside of Daelun, which is situated here in Sembia, a fair distance from Baldur's Gate, but it is where Richter is originally from. I imagine that he likely thinks he is safe, but in the month of Ches 1374, the then Dukes of Baldur's Gate, which may have also included the resurrected Entar Silvershield, recruited a man called Dabron Shashenstar to break the Iron Throne, and they gave him the location of Richter's mansion, who still at this time only knew him to be called Rieltar. Obviously, starting with Rieltar was important to Baldur's Gate, as it was him and his adopted son that had almost thrown Baldur's Gate into what would have been a catastrophic war with the Nation of Arm, only a few years prior. Dabron was the head of the Shashenstar house in Baldur's Gate, a merchant prince and head of the Merchant League.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
It was definitely in his interests to have fair trade in the city and the Iron Throne completely out of it. Agents of House Shashenstar kidnapped Richter from his mansion and brought him back to Baldur's Gate, where he was then interrogated by priests of Waukeen. Richter revealed his true identity and also gave up secrets of the Iron Throne, for example how and who they were founded by. Dabron then meets secretly with Tuth from the Knights of the Shield in the month of Tarsak. Remember Tuth, he's one of the agents from the Knights of the Shield that met with Richter in Candlekeep at the end of Baldur's Gate 1. However, this is where the retcon/contradiction in lore happens, as Dabron strikes a deal with Tuth so that the Knights of the Shield will get rid of Safina in exchange for trade concessions in Baldur's Gate's colonies in northern Maztica. This negates what was said several years earlier in Cloak and Dagger. Given that the Grand History of the Realms is 3rd edition, I suppose we should take that as canon instead of the older 2nd edition. Anyway, the Knights of the Shield contact their divine patron, Gargoth, who has her brought to his infernal domain, where he will eventually trade her to Asmodeus in exchange for some priceless treasure. It could be that Safina did actually just escape the capture of her father in 1371 DR and went back to ruling the Iron Throne for a further 3 years before being recaptured by Gargoth. In the same month of Tarsak, the remaining Iron Throne leaders, Krakosh, Maredi, Hogli, Sitcha and Skit, meet in secret beneath a warehouse in Ordelin. They all vow to continue as a merchant company, but can feel the power of the Gaius that binds them in loyalty to Safina fading. At the end of Tarsak, assassins of the Iron Throne simultaneously murder agents of the Merchant League in Scrawnabel Erebor, and Arabelle. The throne has truly cemented itself as enemy number 1 for Baldur's Gate now. However, as the Iron Throne weaken, the Zhentarim want to fill the vacuum left in the arms trade, and in the month of Kythorn, rumours spread that the Zhentarim have assassinated the leaders of the throne. However, the organisation still has some breath left in it, and at the end of the month of Kythorn, they launched an attack on a Merchant League warehouse, but were roundly defeated. It was then on the 25th of Kythorn that Dabron declared the following: "In the name of the Merchants League and House Shashenstar, I declare that the Iron Throne is sundered." However, a new enemy was rising rapidly in the Western Heartlands, and the Zhentarim would become far more dominant in the Iron Throne's absence. What happened to Richter? I don't know. Perhaps he was caught in the assassinations conducted by the Zhentarim, or he was left to rot in a Baldurian prison. There doesn't seem to be any significant mention of the Iron Throne in 5th edition, and so it seems like the organisation has been decimated. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then do please give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!